All right, hey everyone, welcome back. It is time for the second weekly podcast, Coffee Talk, whatever it is we're calling it, that I'm having here with David. I brought along my bodyguard, as David told me to last week, but I guess Piplup is a little bit big, so he's going to say hi at the start of the call, and then I think we'll put him down for most of this. So, Dave, how's your week been?
My week's been great. Thank you for asking, Dan. It's nice to join you again. I do want to say a few things. I think it's really important for people to know since this is our second version of Koffee, Koffee talk. And I did offer you, let's make it clear because I don't want to seem cheap out there. I offered Dan $500 when we got on this photo shoot just a moment again, this podcast, for the Piplup figure, and he turned me down flatly. So you can see that, greed does set in when the rich get richer, and now they don't need money anymore because of his massive Pokemon collection. And so I will not own Piplup. I will have to be satisfied with just owning large plush figures of Pikachu and Psyduck. Thank you, Dan, for turning me down.
I think Piplup is still available. I think
Oh, really?
You can still get him. I
Okay,
don't know if he's still in the Pokemon Center, but you can still get him easy enough. He's not as hard to get as the Mareep or the Slowpoke.
fair enough. I'm going to go take a look. I'm going to look and see what I can find.
All right.
Dan, let me go through a few other things. I think it's important before, because I know all you ever want to do is talk about Pokemon, and I
Put him down
appreciate
while you're
that.
doing that.
Yeah, sure. Get rid of Piplup. It's been too long. Dan, I had some comments last time about our podcast, and a lot of people were reaching out to me personally, said they didn't want to reach out together, cooperatively with us. They didn't want to offend you, but they said they thought you could use just a little bit of an attitude adjustment.
That's probably
Um,
fair.
any comments on that, Dan? Did you feel like you treated me with the proper respect and stuff?
I feel like I could use an attitude adjustment, but I'm not going to get one.
Okay. Well,
It's
great. Blunt
perfectly fair.
statement, and at least come to a very conclusory statement there. Good.
Yeah.
And this morning I woke up and I said to my wife, it's Sunday. Let's do something special. Let's get out of here. Let's go to a wonderful Sunday brunch in Vegas. And she looked at me with that kind of stunned silence and she said, are you out of your frickin' mind? She said, you have to do a dumb podcast thing with your friend Dan, and it's always Pokemon before me. And she stomped out of the room, Dan. So congratulations on the effect you're having on the marriage at this point in time.
I mean, at least she knows. It would be
Yeah,
it would be a
she
lot
doesn't.
worse if she was still under the impression that she came before the Pokemon. At least
Okay.
she's used to it. You know.
She is very much used to it. All right. So thank
Yeah.
you for both being a good friend and for jeopardizing my marriage. And then lastly, Dan, my story for this morning, the good and bad news, and then we'll get right into Pokemon stuff because I know you
Yeah.
hate hearing any personal tales here. So here in Vegas, we have what's called the water police. And on the outside of each of our showers, you actually are limited in the amount of water and time you can take in a shower. So we have a buzzer, and it basically sounds an alarm when you've been in too long. And you can actually get people from the outside speaking through the speaker to say, that's it, get the hell out. So this morning, I actually got into it on the phone with them because, as you know, I'm a very old man. And sometimes it takes older guys a little longer to clean themselves. They're not the cleanliest, most, whatever. I actually talked them into giving me 4 additional minutes this morning, which for me was a win. So I
There
just
you go.
wanted to point that out. It was a little bit of a rough morning, but now it's a good morning and I'm ready to go.
Yeah. This the Vegas droughts that happen. You've got to
Yeah, the Vegas droughts. Yeah, they're definitely here
yeah.
and centered. So hi, let's talk about Pokemon. What do you want to talk about?
Yeah. Well, let's first start off. I'll read out the. We'll go through the comments that we had on our last episode. 'Cause, we want people to interact with this. We want people to feel like this isn't just me and you talking. We want to feel like people are involved. So we'll go through the comments. So I think we'll start every episode from now on. We'll go through the comments on the previous episode, just see what people are saying, see if people have any questions. So yeah, let's get right into that. First off, I have two different computer mouse here, so I got the wrong one. First off, Alex Hill said, been looking forward to this since you posted about it. Alex is one of the few people on my Patreon, so Alex knew a little bit about this happening before anyone else, because I posted some updates on there. He says, click to a random spot and listen to 30 seconds and already learned something new. Excited to listen to the whole thing whenever free hour, which I believe Alex then did. I think that's been the way it's been for a lot of people. A lot of people just waiting until a time through the week where they could listen to it in one go.
I like Alex Hill. I like his attitude, his positivity. I'm giving him 3 thumbs up, and I only have 2 thumbs.
There we go. Next, we have Peaked at Chew, who I think we both know from Instagram and stuff. So that's my guy right there. Awesome to see him on an interview. We'll be listening to this throughout the day. Excited for the series. Grand Party Pokemon says, great chat. Looking forward to future content. I think there's been a lot of people excited about the fact that this isn't just a one-off. It wasn't just a one-off. We're going to have an actual series of it. We have Lamar
Now wait a
says,
minute. Let's thank Colt
right.
for his first comment, and then it's nice that
Yes.
somebody's looking forward to the next part. I just want everyone to understand that's predicated on me living that long. Okay, continue
Yeah.
on, Dan.
Well, we're getting this one at least. And yeah, just trying to get through them so we don't spend too much time on all the comments. We have Lamar Kisa said, very cool to see you two working together and doing informational videos. I'll be watching everyone for sure. Shout out to Dave too.
I won't say anything else at this point. I know you want to get through, so I'm appreciative of all the comments. I'm shutting my mouth. Go ahead.
You can say some stuff just when the comments are just like, hey, looking forward to the series. We'll please, everyone know that all comments and all interaction are very, very much appreciated. We're very happy with how many people watched the first episode. We're very happy with interaction and how everyone's enjoying it. Next, we have Matthew Thompson, who we both know. You wore the T-shirt I gave you, David. Great to see you back on YouTube.
Maddie, what's up, buddy? Good to hear from you.
So I'm guessing Matty must have brought you a T-shirt when he came to stay with you last year.
Yeah, he actually bought it. He bought it for himself. Honestly, it was way too big for himself, so he acted as a re-gift to me. So that's what happened. But thank you for the thought. That's what matters. Yeah.
There we go. We have Joe R. Vintage Pokemon says, crazy that Dave has a pre-release Raichu just sitting in a binder or top loader somewhere. It needs some authentication and a damn museum. Hurts being a graded card collector seeing this, lol. Well, I mean, the pre-release Raichu is just the tip of the iceberg on what you have that's just sitting in binders and top loaders.
Fair enough. And I appreciated his comment very much because I understand the whole grading versus ungrading kind of controversy or debate. But I really appreciated that. That was a great comment.
I think it's also fair to say the authentication thing, the pre-release Raichu would be a difficult one to get graded even if you wanted to, because of the fact it's not an officially released card. Then there's so much more work into getting anywhere to recognize it when it's not officially released. So
Dan, that's not true, buddy, but I appreciate you saying it. You've been citing that same argument for the last 37 years. And what's happened since then is CGC has jumped into the fray, and they've been much more willing in my mind and what I see to go back through a trail of provenance and whatever that matters for a lot of the test sheets, test issues, one-offs. So I really believe, barring anybody there that just doesn't like me, I think, for example, that card and other ones would get graded. But again, are authenticated. But you know what, buddy? You're entitled to your opinion. You're younger than me. You're a millennial. So generally, you're going to be smarter than me as well.
I mean, my thought is just that the pre-release Raichu, again, we've always talked about this, it's so different to anything else in Pokemon, and there are so many opinions and stuff regarding it that even if there's other things they've graded, maybe they would probably take a much, much closer look at that one. But, we never know. We'll, it's never going to happen because you don't grade, so it's...
Well, which is true. And just so you know, I also know people and I have a few dollars. So I think just from those two standpoints, I could get it graded. But
talking of understatements, you have a few dollars.
Well, I do. I used to, and now they're all in Pokemon cards. But yes, fair enough.
You spend most of them. All right. Next question is from Ketchumall, or next comment, sorry, from Ketchumall Collectibles. He referenced a point in the video, which was when we were talking about people who, they've bought trophy cards for their collection and then ended up selling them on. He said, it's 100% this for me. I had a 1-to-4 full art set, but then the price ballooned and I saw the security it could bring to my family and business selling for about 6 to 8 times what I paid for them. He then mentions that he kept hold of the number 3, but if someone ever wants to pay a market price, he'd probably let it go. And he doesn't even get to appreciate it. It sits in a bank safe deposit box, so he can't justify having the value on hand, insured or not. So just kind of, I guess, backing up what I said, that people were genuinely buying these cards for their collections. It's just when you see that amount of money and think about how it can change your life, there's a lot of people who, would obviously and totally justifiably would instead go for having that financial security and everything for their family. So, to Dan Ketchumall Collectibles, there was no criticism in what I was saying. We weren't trying to say it's wrong of people to be selling these cards. We were just trying to give some explanations as to why. But that's good to know I was on the right track with some of those comments.
Well, by the way, 1 point for you, 0 for me. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah. And the last two comments, we have one from Old School Pokemon and one from Poke Garage, both basically saying the same thing. Great listen, looking forward to episode 2. Amazing video slash podcast. Can't wait for episode 2. And it's
Yeah,
here.
nice of
Episode 2 is
people.
here.
Yeah, nice of people to continue to watch and be positive. That gives me a reason to get out of bed and get on a computer with you.
Yeah. So with comments done, I think the first thing we wanted to talk about today was the heritage auctions that ran over the weekend. A lot of high-end Pokemon items sold on that. So Dave, do you want to start talking about that one?
Yeah, I was very intrigued. I've never been involved in watching or following or bidding on a heritage auction before. So for me, I love all this stuff because it just gives me further education about the hobby and what's going on. And I encourage anybody that whether or not you're going to bid or anything in the future to at least watch one. It's really fantastic. Watch the auctioneers, watch how they try to pull everybody in. Process wise, what was intriguing was you have people that had picked an item and bid on it, maybe put in a secret maximum bid, kind of like eBay before the whole broadcast started. And then you also had people that were bidding live through a proxy person who is sitting on the other end while they have their computers open. So they're sitting in Texas in the room, and the person who's bidding has their computer and is just popping in whatever they want to pop in as far as a price. In addition, they had phone bidders with another proxy bidder sitting on the phone with somebody, and they were going through back and forth trying to encourage the inflated movement of these prices as one person bid against each other. So the process was neat. The watching the auctioneers do their thing was pretty cool. And then obviously, which you'll talk about, watching what some of these things sold for was both interesting and surprising in some instances. So yeah, I really enjoyed the whole thing. Well,
Yeah, for
except
people
let me
who've
say one thing: I didn't enjoy losing out on an item
yeah,
I wanted to get, but
yeah,
other
that's
than that,
always
it was
the
great. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, for people who've never watched a heritage auction, when you think of an online auction, I think people mostly would picture eBay and stuff. It is very different to that. It's not the case of where it's just people typing in their bids and it ends at a certain time. They do that in the lead up to it, so people can put in bids ahead of time. But then it actually finishes with what you'd think of as a traditional auction. There's someone standing there reading out the bids. If someone bids higher, the time extends. It's not a hard cut off to the second like eBay is. And it's more of your traditional auction house. It's just that it's live streamed and there's a lot of stuff going in online. I think so. There was two very very big items, one Japanese, one English, that were kind of the big things of the auction. So for the Japanese one, there was a number 3 1997 Pikachu trophy card from the first tournament in Japan. We'll not talk about that too much since I'm here with David. He's an English collector. He doesn't care about Japanese cards at all. But the other big
well, I don't
item,
want to say. Let's not say I don't care about them.
you
They're
just don't
worth
want them.
caring about. Every card is worth caring
Yeah.
about. But yeah, let's move right to the English stuff.
It's not where either of our personal expertise or interests lie, and I'm sure there'll be enough people out there talking about it who have a better perspective than us on Japanese cards. But the big English item was the complete English versus set. That is the one we discussed briefly last week about it being something you needing to schedule, and this one was a complete set, every card, and was quite highly graded. So everything was graded through CGC. And I don't think there were any low grades. I don't think there was anything lower than a 7 or a 7.5, I believe. I didn't go
That's
through
right.
each grade individually, but there were some very, very high grades in there. And including the buyer's premium, it ended at $187,500. To say this was the version with the error on the Claire's Mantine, so this was the first version. Is there anything? What are your thoughts on that one, Dave? And then I'll talk some more.
Yeah, I mean, so number one is I think we need to at least explain to some people what the buyer's premium means,
Yeah,
because interestingly enough, it means nothing. It actually means absolutely nothing, except for the fact that it does add to the price. They say, here's what somebody bid. We're going to tack on 25% for our services. And
yeah,
so out the door, the person who bid, even if they bid 150 or something, they're out the door at 187,000. So it means that was the price paid for that set, which is extraordinary.
yeah.
Now,
It's
the reason I bring up it not being meaningful is, what are their services? What do they do? So they market it, they put it on an auction thing. Are they worth 25%? I mean, eBay is charging you 13% or something. So one could argue that it's just a gimmick to inflate for the company holding the auctions. And I think about my collection. I'm gonna diverge here just for a moment, but I've been building a collection that we've gone to Worlds every year since 2006, except for the last one. Well, there's a lot of time and expense and things in building and negotiations. And so if I went to sell my collection tomorrow, might I charge a buyer's premium because I felt like I gave some additional value in all of the years of tracking? Possibly. But why do they? I'm not sure. But yes, when you say including buyer's premium, it
Yeah.
means that somebody paid 187,000 for that set, which is a lot of money. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it basically it works again the opposite way to eBay, whereas eBay, the final price on the auction is the price that's paid, and then eBay takes their cut from that price. Whereas when you're bidding at Heritage or at most other auction houses, you bid an amount, and the amount you're bidding is what the buyer is getting paid for the item, but then there is the auction house puts their fees on top of that. So it does work out. It looks like it would say, the item sold for, I think it was 160,000 or so, and then it would say plus buyer's premium. But as you said, including the buyer's premium is the price that the set actually sold for. You wouldn't go look at eBay and say, a card sold for 100. Oh, but eBay takes however many fees, so the card actually sold for 890, 85, whatever. Including the buyer's
Right.
premium is what someone actually paid for that set. It's just that the buyer's premium is the amount that the seller doesn't get.
Yes, yeah, and I think one thing that we found, we were both watching that auction, and so you had sent me stuff as it was going on, and I was muttering to my wife on the other side
Yeah.
as it was going on. It was so interesting to hear the kinds of data they provide, which they really have no idea about. It's an auctioneer standing up there reading a pre-done script of, oh, there's this many sets of this available, and they have no idea,
some
and
of the
yet they're
information
able.
some of
Yes,
the
and they're
information was
able to do
definitely
it.
wrong. It was
Right,
definitely wrong
right.
for some of the auctions.
But what I can say on a positive sense is clearly people are now coming around to the true rarity of that set, and
Yeah,
being maybe the very first of them. So that was interesting as well.
yeah. Like on that one, I don't know if their numbers were entirely wrong because I believe they said 8 sets, which I think is correct for the 2001 set. I think there's eight, like eight would have the Eremantine and eight which have the corrected. I believe that is the correct number for the English sets. But obviously, if they only mention the eight of that set, it doesn't fully give context to the fact that 29 out of those 30 cards do have 16 copies rather than eight. I think when it's stuff like that, I think it sort of seems just like semantics and stuff when you're looking at it, and the difference between 8 and 16. They're incredibly rare cards. They don't come up very often, but it's just like, why do you need to give incorrect information or not? Well, not incorrect information, not give the full information, because then there are going to be people who look at that and go, "Oh, I know that that's wrong." It feels like they're hiding something, and let's say there's obviously nothing on the auction house themselves. I don't think the auction house is doing any research. I think they're just whatever the seller is telling them to say is what's being said. But either way, 187,500 is, as I say, what that ended at. Previously in the past, we've seen people offering. I think the public offers have been around 50,000 for sets. That's what people have been saying. I will pay that for a set. Every time someone mentions one, because I have a video on the English Versus set, so every time someone mentions one, I get a ton of emails saying like, "Oh yes, please let your friend know that I have a very interested client in this." And I'm like, David's not going to sell it, and I know you don't have a client. I know that you saw someone publicly offer it, and you want the middleman fee, but it definitely ended way higher than I thought it was going to, even with them being graded. I personally just, for me, saying what would I throw out there, if you'd asked me beforehand, I would have thrown out maybe about 100,000 because of the fact that they're the high graded versions. I didn't think we'd be coming anywhere close to almost breaking the 200,000 mark.
Yeah, and I've been aware because I've been involved in these more rare items for a while. So I've been aware of private sales that have actually sold for as much as the one that sold at auction. And
Okay.
I don't divulge that, but what it
Yeah.
did tell me is I had bids in to make sure that at least it would go over 100. I think I was up to like 106. And that
Okay.
wasn't that I wanted it or needed it. It was just to make sure that based on the real value of the set, what it really should sell for, I do feel an obligation at times to make sure the market's at least pricing something at a point where it should be based on its rarity, even if that demand isn't necessarily known yet or there yet.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wasn't all that's. I guess I was surprised in a little bit of a way, but
Okay.
not from what it's actually gone for before.
That's fair. Like, because I'm the information guy, but I guess with a lot of private sales, people are okay sharing the private sales with people who own these cards, but not just anyone. So I
Right.
guess I miss out
Right.
on a lot of that stuff. I've just seen the public offers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Next, the next thing I mentioned to you in our messages was the actual physical trophy from the first national championships, like the trophy of Pikachu. It has a first place logo on it and has the Nationals logo on it. Went for 17,500, including the buyer's premium, which I was very very shocked on that because historically, the actual physical trophies, you know, haven't sold as much as the cards have. Not as many winners are willing to let them go, but also not as many people have been interested in actually owning the physical trophy, whether it's been from Worlds or Nationals or whatever. The only times I've ever seen a couple sell was like species collectors, people who collected Luxray items or Garchomp items would try and get the ones with those Pokemon on. But I don't think we've ever seen anything like this sale for an actual trophy before.
Yeah, and I don't have much knowledge. I had a lot of that stuff years ago, from collections that were purchased when it really didn't have any demand. Now the only thing I ever see in my world is the trophies, the really kind of 3D, type of trophies from 2014, 15 on. Those Pikachu
Yeah, yeah,
ones, which are so brittle and breakable, but are still treasured just because they're so neat,
yeah,
to really look at, and again aren't let go of that much by the winners. When I have bought cards in the past, I've always encouraged the winners to hold on to the trophies, as when they part with the cards, just because I think it's more of a displayable memory for a lot of them.
yeah. I think a lot of winners do. The I think possibly some of the interest has come from the fact that, like you said, since about 2014 onwards, Worlds at least has had the same trophy. It's been just it has the different year on it, but they haven't done anything interesting or different with the trophies. So people who are actually looking at this stuff now, if they start actually delving back through Pokemon's history, you see all these crazy, like really, really different looking trophies. And I think that's probably where some of the interest is coming from. Just the fact of going like, oh, these have been all the same for 10 years. What was before that? Oh, this is something completely different.
Yeah,
But
it makes sense.
even with taking all of that into account, 17,500 was a lot. In my opinion, it was not what I thought it would go for. I think a lot of this auction surprised me, to be honest.
Yeah, this auction basically showed that for a general portion of the population, the recession is not real just yet.
Yeah, it's the few people who have enough money that they are completely recession proof.
Right.
Another one I actually didn't message you about this one, but one that caught my eye was the Tropical Mega Battle tablecloth, which had the different play things on it, and that one went for 2,750, including the buyer's premium. And the reason that one really surprised and shocked me is that I have one, it's on that table because when we set this room up, we didn't think they were worth anything. They were worth maybe $100 from what we'd seen before. So I actually have one. I'll move a bit. You can see it there. I'm literally just using it as a tablecloth. It's
I saw your post on that
yeah.
saying
It's
only
it's
you
like
would
keeping. It's
right,
just
only you
keeping
would use
bulk
it.
off
You
the
had you
table.
for a tablecloth that's worth more than everything that's on top of it. So
Yeah, and the fact that one thing they said in the auction for that one was there's a lot of like, oh, we haven't seen this here before. You never know when there's going to be another one, and it's like no, there's actually quite a lot of those. It's just that no one's ever bothered selling them. Like from the comments on my post, Charlie Herlocker, who we both know, he mentioned he's got like 8 to 12 of them because he ran an event years back and he bought a load of them just to set them up on all of his tables at the event because they were cheap enough to do that. And he's just had them since. Another friend of mine, Jimmy O'Brien, he mentioned that he has one. that he got signed by Ishihara and I think Masuda and someone else at Worlds a few years back. And I haven't spoken to them, but I would assume that people like Mike Martin, Vince Kreckler, all of that crowd, I imagine they must have some of these, because those guys who have been around since then, they have everything. Like you just don't realize what a lot of those old tournament organizers are still sitting on, because they don't realize what they're sitting on, because when they put it in the storage box in their garage, no one would buy it for $50. So they're all just in like three people's garages, and you just never know what they're going for. But that one did just catch my eye, because I looked at the photo and then I was like turning around and I was like, hang on, is that the same? And double checking, and yeah, it was.
Well, see, now you've given a reason for everyone to be watching your podcast, because they can figure out what they have that's actually worth something that they would not have known previously, and
Yeah,
begin to monetize this stuff for their family's well-being, rather than hang on to it for selfish, individualistic reasons.
yeah. So if you were organizing Pokemon events back in the early 2000s, check your garage and see if you now have some $3,000 tablecloths.
All right, we're going to talk about, how about we talk about one item for my heritage experience?
Is
You
that
ready?
the? Yep, you go ahead.
The Uncut sheet. So the Uncut sheet, base edition, Cosmos foil. I had harbored some illogical notion of working with some individuals to try to put a reasonable bid in and have a shot at getting it, and maybe being able to since I only found out within the last year or so that there was even this variant, and I had no idea, I didn't have it because I wouldn't have known. And so
Yeah.
this Cosmos foil variant on the sheet, and it comes to auction, and I've got a pretty reasonably high bid in for a retired individual who may not make it on his finances all the way to death. And it was nowhere near what the thing
Yeah.
closed at, as you had a persons who had bid previously to the auction going against someone on the telephone,
Yeah.
and they just kept going and going and going. And tell us what that uncut base edition set sheet with the Cosmos foil variant went for, Dan. What did it was go for
So,
with a buyer's premium?
including the buyer's premium, it went for $250,000.
1/4 of $1 million. That's
Yeah,
pretty amazing for a single uncut
it
sheet
was.
from
So for
1999. Yeah.
people who don't exactly know what that is, it is a sheet of the holo cards, all the holo cards from base set. You can sort of see a fossil one on the wall behind me, but you can't properly see it. But it featured Cosmos foiling, and if you know your base set, you'll know that base set was never released with Cosmos foil. They didn't start Cosmos foil until base set 2 Team Rocket era. The first few sets didn't have that foiling at all. So these sheets are the only place you can actually see those. As far as we know, no factory cut individual copies of these Cosmos foil cards have ever come out. There's a similar thing that happens with Fossil, because Fossil didn't have Cosmos foil. It used the same foil as base set, but you can get the Fossil holos in a Cosmos variant, but those came as individual cards that people from Pokemon sold years later. They were, they'd been professionally factory cut. They had all the corners and everything done correctly. They were the individual cards. But that's not the case with the base set sheet. As far as I know, no one's seen base set Cosmos foils that have come from Pokemon properly cut or anything like that. So this sheet is the only place you can get those Cosmos foils, which is the reason I think a lot of people went for it, and also the reason a lot of people didn't know about this variant before, probably yourself included, Dave, because it wasn't an individual card. There was never a card you could go and get. It was you had to get something different, so something you probably wouldn't have looked at in the past.
Yeah, yeah. And so on this topic, I've learned a lot just in the last several weeks, kind of boning up for the auction and other things. So why don't you tell us about the difference? I'm not allowing you to comment on values or which is more rare. You are not
Okay,
able
good.
to do that, please. But I would like you to say, what do you think about Cosmos versus Disco, and that there's these two sheets that are kind of peacefully coexisting out there that people need to understand why they're different and what makes them different and that kind of stuff.
All right, so I think there's a couple of main differences between the Cosmos foil sheet and the Disco foil sheets. I will say as well, some Disco foils sold at the Heritage Auction. A full sheet didn't sell. These were ones that had been cut from the sheet. So I think they all had square corners. They may have had
Yes.
rounded corners done, but they were what's known as NFC cards, non-factory cut, which means that these were made by someone purchasing a sheet and third-party cutting them up. Um, the main differences are one, well, for popularity anyway, the main differences are one, the Cosmos foil sheet are fully completed cards just using the Cosmos foil. The Disco one is much earlier or at a different point in production where it doesn't have all of the information on the card. I think it's missing some of the energy symbols, some of the other text. So it's very, very clearly a test print, whereas the Cosmos foil ones, they don't look like a test print. They look like real finished Pokemon cards. You would only actually know if it was a test print if you really, really knew about base set and knew that this Cosmos foil never got released. So that's one of the big differences to it. The other big difference, and this difference is why I think the Cosmos one is probably more desirable on like just in owning the sheet, is because the fact that the Cosmos foil was then later used, starting from, as I say, base set 2, and a version of Cosmos foil is used even today. Cosmos foil is very, very popular with a lot of people, and so there are people who will want to collect Cosmos foil because they really, really like it. It's a very, very iconic foil, like the Wizards of the Coast era, and as I say, they even use a variant of it now. So I think that people probably would be more interested in the Cosmos foils. Again, this is just my take on the situation. I know everyone is going to have their own individual opinion. There's going to be a lot of people who will prefer the Disco foils, and that's totally fine. I'm just saying I can see why I think a population as a whole would prefer the Cosmos foils because it is something that was then later used with Pokemon, and so it does have that tie to the later sets that the Disco foils don't. And the fact that when it's a display piece, finished Pokemon cards look cooler as a display piece. With the unfinished ones, the test prints like the Disco foils, I think they're a more interesting story. Like you can show them off to people and say, it's missing this information. It was this point in production. They hadn't put this on yet. But if it's just purely, I'm going to put this on my wall and I want it to look awesome, a sheet with, was it 9 base set Charizards or something on it, looks really, really cool. Like the 9 finished base set Charizards, it's what people remember. So, as I say, that is personally just my opinion. I think this Cosmos one looks a lot cooler than the Disco one, and those are some reasons why I think it would be more popular. How about you, Dave? Do you have any preference to them, or?
Well, I knew exactly what you were going to say, which is why I deliberately forbade
Yeah.
you from going into that entire diatribe. And yet you just ignored me as you often do,
Well,
and
I
you
did.
claimed your opinion.
You told me not to mention rarity or values, and I didn't. I just tried to talk about what I thought would be more popular. And
All right, fair enough. Well, you know what? I'm one of the people that's actually still American and still believes you're entitled to your own opinion, even if you're not a U.S. person to start off with. Your mom
even if
had
you
you in
are,
another country. A
even if
Brit.
you are an immigrant like myself.
Yes, exactly. So, but I will say, I can't say I do agree with you. I'm on the other side of the fence, and it's only because for me the discos really look finished because I'm not one that sits there and says like you notice that the character information is gone. It's just under the picture box, and you notice the energy symbols are gone. You really have to sort of look for it. Otherwise, it does have a hollow pattern. It looks cool, and I think for me, it might come down to this concept of rarity. I'm not sure which is more rare. Ultimately, what we'll find out.
Yeah,
But I like something that's even more pre-production in the sense that, it's just different even than what would normally be like Cosmos foil. So, but that's again just my opinion. You're
yeah.
entitled to yours, even if it's not correct. And I think we just have to, we have to agree to disagree, and that's fine. I'm okay with that.
I will say, for the actual cut from the sheet cards that we saw, if you had a cut from the sheet disco foil and a cut from the sheet cosmos foil, I think in that scenario I would think the disco foil was cooler, because just looking at the one card, it's more interesting. I was talking purely for the sheet. I
Yes,
think
yeah, for
the
the
uncut
display
sheet,
factor.
I would think that the display factor of the cosmos one would look a lot cooler than the disco one.
Yeah,
But
and
I could,
I do believe a millennial opinion has as much value as mine, if not more. So I'm going to go. You may cause me to change my opinion in time.
or you'll just outlive me and then
Well, and I won't outlive you, but I might out hobby you, so that's fine.
yeah. You never know. My health is not in good shape.
Well,
I am
if we could get you some subscribers, a few more Patreon people to help pay the medical expenses, it
yeah.
might be better. So, folks that are listening, help out my buddy Dan. I'm not here in this journey without him. I couldn't be anywhere close to having this collection without him. So anything you can do to support my good friend Dan Norton, even if he is originally a Brit, let's all step up and do a little something.
If you all go join my Patreon, I'll eat more salad and less McDonald's, and see if I can
I like it.
see if I can't squeeze out another couple of years.
I like that. I like that. Very
Maybe I'll
nice.
do some exercise. I might go for a run or something. Who knows?
I might pay to watch that on Patreon. So we'll see if we can work something out
There we
there.
go.
Okay.
I'll add a Patreon tier where it's if people subscribe at a certain level, then I'll go for a run every week and tell people about it.
Yes, even if they go higher, like a half marathon at some point.
It'd be a lot of money for that. My
Yes.
lungs
Yeah.
are not in the shape to run a half marathon. I need a lot of
Okay.
training for that one.
Nice.
Okay,
Nice. All right.
a couple more items from the Heritage Auction I think I want to mention. The Stadium Challenge Deoxys, PSA 10, sold for 13,750, including the buyer's premium. That one, again, was another card we mentioned last week. There are only 2 copies in a PSA 10, which are in the PSA registry, that is. One thing to mention about the Stadium Challenge Deoxys when it's being graded is that PSA did not recognize Stadium Challenge Deoxys for a long time. So there are Stadium Challenge Deoxys, my own personal copy included, which are graded but are simply labeled as the regular set version. So I don't believe there are any known PSA 10s which have the wrong label, but I can at least say, personally, from my copy, there is at least one PSA 9 Stadium Challenge Deoxys, which is not labeled as a Stadium Challenge Deoxys in the POP report. But as I say, this is one of 2 copies that has been given the 10 that is correctly labeled. And this was another one where they definitely gave incorrect information on the live stream. And on the description they said there were 25 copies of it given out when all evidence points to 50. We spoke about this last week, and as I said as well, then there is a much more in-depth video on my channel about the Deoxys, which goes much heavier into the evidence as to why it's more likely 50 than 25. Again, the difference between 25 and 50, it's not crazy. No one's saying, "Oh, I'll buy that card if there's only 25 copies, but I'm not going to buy it if there's 50." It just seems like the information should be correct. People should know what they're buying.
Yeah, and on that note, and you said earlier, like, who do you blame or who do you not blame the auction house? It's just supplied by the seller. But I do think it's important. One of the things that I'm critical about is just either be transparent or realistic with your information, or say, I don't know. So I'd like that if they were reading off this, this kind of background information on the card when they announce it at the auction, I'd rather that the auctioneer said, to our knowledge, or from what's the information that's been supplied to us, to the best of the information supplied to us, here's what we know. But we're not the authorities, and you'd rather, you can always go to the authorities of the hobby. Something that at least says, we're not giving you definitive answers, because you're always going to have new people jumping into any hobby, in any situation, in any industry, and they're prone to believe someone, especially if they're indicating, well, we're the big auction house and we're the big folks and we know exactly what we're doing and we do this every day, so we know the numbers. That's the implication. And the problem there for me is it's absolutely 100% false. There should not be that implication. The information is not correct, and they're willing to read anything to try to jack the hype of something up to try to increase the price and their buyer's premium. And I don't think that's okay. That doesn't work for me anyway. So.
Yeah. My assumption is that them, for legal reasons, somewhere in their terms and conditions, there must be a clause that's where they say that they take no responsibility for incorrect information. Like, I would imagine they must have that in there somewhere for legal reasons. But yeah, I totally agree. And as I say, there's no real benefit to it because I don't think that the price would be different on that card if you said there's 50 of them. So why say there's 25? It's not even like you're lying and saying there's 20 copies of a card rather than 10,000. It's just it's one of the things that I think. I mean, maybe the seller made a legitimate mistake. Maybe they're not lying. They just haven't done their research properly. But if you don't know, look at something you can find out. Like I say, with the evidence points towards 50 copies, and that is something I would say is pretty conclusive given all the evidence that we have. As I said, more detail in those other videos, but it's not 100%. So maybe just go to the PSA population report and say, in the PSA pop report, there are only X amount of labeled Stadium Challenge Deoxys graded. You can go to it and you can say, here is a definitive number. PSA have only graded this many copies. CGC have only graded this many copies. It's if you don't know, go to information that you do know. Uh,
And we
but
talked about this last week. We talked about
yeah,
the fact I mentioned that it's very often the case that someone who is wanting to sell something will decrease the number of cards that they feel are available in their narrative, and somebody who wants
yeah,
to buy will say no, there's many more. So I just think there's an inherent conflict of interest, and I'd rather there was a little bit more of a of those terms and conditions kind of described early and often, just to protect
yeah,
people. And let me say one more thing about that, just kind of as a tangential point. Okay, so this was only the second graded 10 copy, et cetera, et cetera. But if you looked at that card, if you were to look at that card that they had posted, it didn't look like a 10 to me. It didn't look anything like a 10 to me. I would have called it a 9 at a best, at the very best. So I am not a grading person. And this is an example of why I do not grade 100% because I don't want someone to tell me something when it's not the case. But this is why sometimes it's important to actually look at the card and not just accept it. We don't know
yeah,
who was grading. We don't know necessarily on that day when it was graded. How has the grading changed over the years? Has it gotten easier or tougher depending on when the original ones were put in? But when I talked to people and they looked at those pictures, they didn't feel like it should have been a 10 as well.
yeah,
And I'm sure again, your more novice collectors are going to say, well, it's a 10. I don't care. That works for me just great. And others are going to say, just because their expectations are higher, that it really shouldn't have been a 10. And I don't like the visual of owning it despite it being a 10 because I realize it really shouldn't have been.
yeah. I think there's definitely there are some people who will collect tens who will openly state, I'm collecting this because of the number on the PSA label. Like I collect PSA tens of Vaporeon because it's my favorite Pokemon, and I will openly say you could give me the tens and you could give me nines and sometimes you could give me eights, and if you covered up the numbers, I wouldn't be able to know which was which. I'm doing it because of the number on the PSA label for that little sub collection. I think it's kind of cool, but
Wait a
I
sec.
don't.
So wait, hold on a second, because you're saying something that I don't know what you're saying. So I want you to describe in case there's other people that may not know exactly what you're saying. Are you implying that the number is indicative of a time period that is better or worse in grading, or what are you
Oh
implying when
no,
you say the number?
when I say the number, I just mean the number 10, like the gem
Oh,
mint
okay,
10. I'm
okay.
I'm paying for that number because I just want the labels to say that number. But
I
if you
see.
showed me, like if you graded all cards at once, it could go through the same grader on the same day. And if you showed me a 10, a 9, and an 8, there's a good chance I can't pick out one from the other. Um, so I think there is
There's
some
no
amount of that
significance.
where
Well, so do you think there's any significance to the actual time frame? So when I thought you meant numbers for a moment,
the
you have a
serial number.
PSA grade, yes, the serial number, and somebody might say, "Oh, when they graded those back in the day, they were always more accurate, or now they were less accurate, or there's have time frames from your experience change some of the grading standards."
So I know there's a lot of people talk about it, but again, it's I think where any card on a certain day, no matter what the time period, there are always going to be cards that could go 9, could go 10. When you've got that level of grading standard, there are always going to be borderline cases where anytime you send it in, anytime through PSA's history, the same card could get a 10 on one day, could get a 9 on another day, just depending on who hits it. And again, when you see people talking about this time period or the certification number, it's people either trying to buy cards and say, oh, well, your card starts with a 4, so that's when they were bad at grading, so you should sell it to me for less. Or they're saying, well, my card starts with a 5, so that means it's a better 10, you should pay me more money. I really try to not at all get involved in the discussion of certification numbers meaning stronger grades, because it just feels like another thing where it's so close and it's something that you just can't know by looking at it. It feels like something that people try to take advantage of and just try and get more money out of their cards and convince other people that their stuff's worth less. And people are never going to be fully accurate on that. And to say, so the illustrator that Logan Paul bought for 5.25 million, that was a 10. It was the only PSA 10 illustrator, and as part of that deal, he traded a 9 as part of the deal. So he traded a PSA 9 and $4 million for a 10. Now, that 10 was known about in the community for a long time. Obviously, it was owned by a guy called Dubsy, who was out in Dubai. So it hadn't been seen in a while, but people knew about it because that card was graded a 9. And I think it was graded a 9 4 or 5 times. The owner of it knew it was borderline, graded it, got a 9, got it back, smashed the case open, sent it in again, got a 9, back, smashed the case open, until eventually, it got seen by the person who thought it was a 10. And, that's not the first case of that happening. Some of the PSA pop reports can be off a bit based on people doing that. Like, I think it's University Magikarp has a huge population of PSA 5s in the report, but it was the same 5. Like, someone because a 5 or a 6, it's like if there's any sort of dent, it's an automatic 6. Any sort of crease, it's an automatic 5. But I believe there was a University Magikarp that had the tiniest crease, and it's like if you send it in, you just keep doing it until someone misses the crease. And I know I personally have a card which is a PSA 6 of a Grand Party promo, the one with the 3 birds on it. I didn't know that was going to be a 6 when I sent it in. I thought it was going to be a 9 or a 10. When I got it back, a few of us went over it with a flashlight, and we finally found it almost looked like someone had taken just a sewing needle and tapped it on the back. There was the tiniest dent. Now, I know that if I cracked that out of its PSA case and sent it back, even if I had to do it a couple of times, that's coming back a 9 or a 10 at one point, because someone is going to miss that when you just have people looking at the card, even though the true grade of it should be a 6. And
Wow.
so I think when you're looking at if you're buying PSA 10s, and you're specifically going for the 10, I think it's just something you have to acknowledge that's happening. And I think there's a lot of people, especially sellers, will try and put this almighty thing on, oh no, the PSA 10 means it's perfect. And, it doesn't necessarily mean that. You have to look at each individual card you're buying. I mean, this has got just way, way too long and off topic about this Deoxys, but I think the bottom line is always make sure you're looking at the card you're buying. Never just say, I'm buying that because it's a PSA 10, unless you're opening it, openly acknowledging, as I do with my Vaporeons, I'm buying that because it says 10, even though there is a chance it's maybe not.
Good. Very informative, my friend. Yes.
Sometimes I'll go on a bit of a rant about stuff.
That's all right. I'm glad I'm not Laura and have to listen to it every night.
All right, so we've had a rant from Dan, and we've talked about some prices on some high-end auctions. So, David, you added a very, very nice item to your collection this week. Maybe it's solved some of the hurt from missing out on that sheet, but why don't you tell us what you did manage to buy this week?
All right, fair enough. It is surprising to me that outside of new sets, which I have to continue to keep up on, and I actually added one of those, but I have no idea which set it was. I know it has silver borders, and I don't really like them. So I guess
Scarlet
that's
Violet.
Yeah,
That's
so I
the
don't
newest set. They made the
the
change.
newest set. So I don't like the silver borders. I just like to put that out there. But I did like some of the full arts were a little different. They almost look a little
Yeah.
more painting style. But
I
we'll save that for yeah, we'll
yeah.
save it for another
Maybe
discussion.
next week we can talk
Maybe
about
next
Scarlet
week.
Violet. Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. So yes, I had an interesting opportunity. It is one of the things that I have not filled into my collection as of yet, which surprisingly there's a handful of them. And I had just never ever thought about it through the years because I wasn't a huge fan of error cards necessarily. But let me tell you how I differentiate and how this came about. Folks know I collect English only. My theory there is it needs to be something that I can read. So, English cards, I can read them, bilingual, I can read them, that's in the collection. Now, with respect to error cards, there are, of course, these tremendous error card groups, misprints, etc., crinkle cuts, off centers. And for those, I consider them more one-offs. I know sometimes they're not. There's many of them, but for error cards, I tend to collect the ones that are have been mass produced to some degree in some fashion.
Yeah.
So you again would know more about this than me, but like a Nine Tails without the damage or something, or without
Yeah.
the HP. I don't know what I'm talking about,
Yeah.
but
But
or a Blastoise. Was it Blastoise without the evolution or something?
yeah, so there was a Blastoise that was missing the word stage, and there was a Wartortle that had the wrong Pokemon in the evolution box. There was a Wartortle in the evolution box, but I guess to basically break it down, it's misprints that happened, in the factory. There's something physically wrong with the card, something's missing, rather than the crimps in the like when they're being put into the packets, the crimping stuff like that isn't what you
Or
what you
just an
go
off
for.
cut or something, or like
Yeah,
half of two different cards. I don't collect those for whatever reason. It's just, again, I'm looking because I know a lot of people do and they really enjoy it.
yeah,
But for me, I'm looking for the ones that are kind of more, uh, again, maybe less of a one-off. So,
yeah,
so something that I had not had was these Wizards of the Coast, the movie cards, the 4 movie card set. They have that Wizards of the Coast stamp in the upper right corner, the gold stamp. And of course, I was fortunate back in 2004 to buy the collection that had the Wizards of the Coast cards without the stamp.
yeah,
The
yeah,
person had collected those and found those. Those had not been readily known to my knowledge until the last, couple of years. And I had only been aware of one person across the world who had a set. Rusty at TCA had a couple of the cards, and maybe some others had one or two. Now, recently, I've seen more of them come out. Still pretty expensive, something like 20,000 a card for those cards, Wizards of the Coast stamps, without the stamp at all on the
yeah,
card. So no stamp at all. And now the ones I didn't have were the inverted stamps, which people were much more aware of. I'd never collected those.
yeah.
So maybe a couple, 3 years ago, Rusty was kind enough at TCA Gaming. His name comes up all the time to help me hook up with, I think, one of the 4 cards. It might have been a Pikachu. And I've been in contact with him over the last few years to just say, I think I'd like to pick these up. If you ever are aware of something or aware of them out there in a condition that would be suitable for me, which everything, despite it not being graded, I'm looking for near mint
Yeah.
to mint or better. I'm interested in accumulating these cards. And so, not too long ago, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 weeks ago, he said to me, I know of this individual who has sealed copies, sealed, still in the original cellophane, Wizards of the Coast movie cards, where he's not removed them, but he knows that by sliding them around, that they're upside down Wizards of the Coast gold stamped, inverted cards.
Yeah, yeah,
And he put me in touch with that person, and I reached out and was very fortunate to be able to acquire the full set of the 4 cards. You would know what they are. I can think of Dragonite maybe, and Pikachu, and
um,
Electabuzz,
and Mewtwo. Yeah, those three
and
plus
Mewtwo,
Mewtwo. Yeah,
So that individual, his name is Ruskin Pena from Boston. He actually flew in to our home with his girlfriend Max, and they came this past Friday night. And so they're actually using us as an Airbnb. And while they're off in Vegas partying with the newfound wealth that he has, From no, he's not spending it. We're trying to make it as inexpensive as possible, but it was wonderful to meet two great people and acquire the cards, and they're off doing their thing for another couple of days while I have these cards to add to the collection. Yeah, original cards.
Yeah,
I know I'm talking a lot, but you know what, Dan? They can't always listen to you. So
yeah,
let me say a couple more things. How he came about these cards, where his dad was the like manager at a movie theater. And so back in the day, they got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these promotional sealed packs. And when he was 11 years old, he had opened one and realized it was an upside down inverted stamp of a Pikachu, and he'd put it into a binder. And he's had that card ever since he was 11 or so, so almost 20 some years ago plus, which gave him the idea that there might be something else. He's not that much into Pokemon.
yeah,
And he decided to take the packs that he had in his possession, which were left, a couple of hundred packs, and kind of, sort them by fingers and go through and see if he could find something, and ended up finding these inverted stamps inside. And I was talking with him, which is so interesting because we were talking about how rare these would or would not be to still have the inverted stamps inside the cellophane wrap.
right, yeah,
And because we've all seen them outside, and again, even not always in the best condition. And these ones were nice. They're probably would grade at 8s or 9s, little tiny, tiny whitening on the back.
yeah,
So we talked about how difficult it probably is to find these sealed because everybody's opening them. And so you're
yeah.
opening to look, and unless you realize quickly enough in the opening process that you're onto something and you stop that opening process, you might continue to roll right on through and not have any of these available. So I'm interested to hear what you know about finding them still sealed. Are they rare? Are they not? Are they, how many have you heard about, et cetera?
Well, so there's going to be some pictures on screen for people looking, but I'll give a bit more, just kind of a bit more information about what exactly we're talking about here. So the original movie promos obviously have, after the cards are printed, they have a gold stamp put in the top corner which says Pokemon the first movie on it. We're talking about versions of cards that either don't have that stamp or feature the stamp upside down in the bottom left corner rather than being the right way up in the top right, which means that the printing sheet got put into the stamping machine upside down. Now, when we
And
talk
these
about
are
these
and these
cards,
are Black Star promos 2, 3, 4, and 5, correct?
yeah, original Black Star promos that you got one at random basically by going to see the first Pokemon movie in cinemas. And when we talk about them being sealed, they're sealed as one card in cellophane, but you can only see the back of the card because there's an insert card over the top of the card. Again, like I say, there's going to be a lot of photos on screen during this, but basically the only way to tell if you have the inverted error is you have to very, very carefully, you have to do it with like a tip of a fingernail to do this without damaging the card, is put the card to the very bottom of the plastic and slide the insert up within the plastic seal. There's just enough room where you can just about reveal where the gold stamp would be if it was an inverted error, or if you do it pushing down, you can see where the stamp is if it's in the right place. And in terms of rarity for the actual cards, obviously the no stamp ones are rare. They're rarer than the upside down stamp ones. The no stamp ones, David, yours are the only ones I've ever seen. You're the only person I know with a set. I don't know where those originally came from because I've never heard of anyone opening any of those from the sealed packs. They might have come from, as some other stuff does, those might have come from a Wizards of the Coast employee. Those might never have made it to packs, but we did always know that the upside down ones did make it to these sealed cinema packs. In terms of rarity of the actual cards, based on how many we've seen over the years, people theorized it was probably one or two printing sheets went in the machine upside down, which would lead to 30 or 60 copies of each of the four cards have the upside down error. Which, again, that's not an exact science. That's just what people have said over the years. We've seen more changing hands in recent years, but I think that's more the same copies changing hands rather than, a lot more coming out. In terms of the sealed ones, there is a good chance you have the only sealed set. There is a good chance that, unless Rusty also managed to pick up a set for himself before sending the guy to you, or this seller found some more in his stack, I can't see there being very many more at all, if any, still sealed. I think this is a really, really unique item. I don't think you're going to see any other people having this, just because of, one, the difficulty of actually looking for the stamp, just the knowledge beforehand. Only, probably experienced collectors or experienced Eric collectors are even going to know to look if that stamp is there. Any new collector who's, maybe just buying a sealed set, there's a good chance they're just going to open them and put them in a binder. So even if they did end up randomly finding one, there's a much higher chance it gets opened, because these promos themselves, the non-error versions, are very, very common, very, very cheap promos. You can honestly get sealed copies of these promos you can get for a couple of dollars each. And it's only the error versions that are incredibly rare. So I don't think, because of, I keep repeating myself, but for all those reasons, I don't think we're going to see many more, if any more, of these upside down stamped ones still sealed. I mean, we don't see that many of the upside down stamped ones at all. I don't have a set. My wife Laura does. I'm very jealous. She has a set of them upside down stamped. But very, rare cards on their own. The idea of one still being sealed, even rarer. All right, so I think that pretty much covers them. I think I don't want to be repeating myself anymore, so I think that's all we really need to say on those.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Great explanation. I appreciate it. I'm excited definitely to have them as part of the collection. I've really tried to fill in the little nuanced holes. And again, I just have to take another second to shout out Rusty at TCA Gaming, one of the best guys in the hobby. Always kind to me, always supportive, never threatened by anything, always collaborative. Doesn't happen without him, as well as Ruskin Pena and his girlfriend, Max, in from Boston. Who was kind enough to let me place them as part of the collection. So my shout out again to all of them, and for you for letting me highlighting them today, Dan. Thanks.
Hey, I mean, I'm very happy to have my channel be the place where you're announcing that you have these. I'm very, very happy for that to happen.
Cool.
So we've hit, I think we've talked enough for today. Hopefully people did enjoy this episode, and hopefully people are looking forward to the next one. And as you saw, if you leave a comment on this video, we will make sure to read it out. And if you have any questions, ask those in the comments, and maybe we'll talk about them a little bit next week. Any final things you want to say, Dave?
No, you may want to, again, my appreciation for you and letting me have some visibility so I don't have to do all the technical stuff myself. I think it might make sense at this point. Shoot my wife some flowers or something just to say sorry about the whole brunch escapade, and I'll look forward to talking to you again soon, okay?
Yeah, well, me and Laura will take your wife out for a dinner next time we come to Vegas.
Okay, sounds good, buddy. Stay away from the tables, just eating, no gambling.
Yeah, will do. All right, okay. And to everyone, thanks again for watching, and we will see you again next week. Hopefully, as long as stuff goes okay, but we'll see you again definitely very soon. I would like to say a huge thank you to everyone who chooses to support me on Patreon. If you'd like to get involved, help support the channel, and see some behind-the-scenes content, click on the link in the description. Thanks again.
Thanks for watching. Check out some more videos right here.
And don't forget to subscribe for more awesome Pokemon content from DJ Gigabyte.
Gotta catch 'em all!